you. Okay.
Oops.
No worries. All good.
Okay. Okay, well, then I should work on my accent since I'm being recorded.
Okay.
Most people can that don't know where I'm coming from can tell what my accent is, because it's a mix of 3 languages. My first language is my first one is Spanish. Being born in Argentina, growing up as a teenager in Israel, and then moving to Montreal, and from Montreal to the West Coast. So it's a kind of a mix in every language. And thank you for, if you don't understand anything, I'm glad you will have the recording to listen to it again. Where shall I start? By sharing my screen, I think. What you're going to see is mostly artwork, and I will be talking. And I will start with doing a short introduction to the concepts of Jungian society, the process, and then just dive into my own process as an example for everybody that to inspire you to follow your own destiny, your own process. So I need to go down here. I think I got it, and then share, and then we go in here. Okay, here we are. So, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're all good. Yeah.
Okay, I did it. So far, so good. Yes, your destiny. What is your destiny? According to the Jungian individuation process, as we know, is the idea of following your higher self. I would call it myself, your spirit. And this is what I took from the Upanishads that spoke strongly to my heart. You are what your deed, what your, I have this, sorry, but I have to do this again so I can move some here so I can see my screen. Bear with me for a second. Okay, now it's better. Now I can read and see my screen. So yes, you are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. And as your deed is, so is your destiny. I will be going over this. And what the image that you see is taken from the, these are all my images, as I said. And this is my work on the tarot cards, the Fool, jumping into the unknown. Oops. Come, I can't. I am having again some trouble here.
Do you advance the slides?
I can't move the slides.
You use arrow key. Will that work on your keyboard?
Hold on a second. Something got stuck here. Oh,
there
we go.
We're good.
And yeah. As you can see, I'm not very practiced in technology of Zoom, but I'm getting there. Individuation is a path of consciousness. The Jungian individuation work, in its essence, as I understand it, consists of uniting all the disparate aspects of our psyche into so-called one harmonious whole, whereas the relationship is the right one between our ego and our self. The self will be to the ego as the sun is to the moon. And the idea is to achieve some kind of wholeness as the ethos, the path, And when and if it happens, it feels like a kind of miracle. Okay. Uniting the polarities will be in a way to achieve some kind of harmony as opposed to the chaos that we feel quite often in ourselves. What is the self? I'm going to go fast in this part because I believe that most of you are quite familiar with all this terminology, but for some of you that are not, I need to clarify this to begin with. The self, I consider it the light as we feel it, the soul, spirit part of ourselves, quite different from the ego as we know it. The self in the traditional religions are what we call Yahweh, Christ, the God images, as Jung talks about the archetypal self as the God image, and exist whether we are consciously or not of it. The God image is a synonymous of the self, kind of a spiritual instinct in the unconscious that gives meaning to our lives. In the Old Testament, I grew up studying the Bible, the individual and God is quite similar to Jung terminology as ego and self, and perceive each other, the psyche, from very different points of view. As Isaiah is written, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways. It is Yahweh who speaks. Yes, the heavens are as high above the earth as my ways are above your ways, and my thoughts above your thoughts." The point of the story is to make our ego, our consciousness, in the service of this higher self, of God, Goddess. And I like thinking about it this way, that since the self dwells beyond the restrictions of space and time, it can see ahead, it knows the effects of all our choices. Whereas the ego, on the other hand, as we know, dwells in the here and now, the space-time, and is able to take action. The self then can see ahead, but cannot take action, and the ego can take direct action, but cannot see ahead. So this is, I believe, the perfect collaboration. As your desire is, so will be your will. The function of the ego, actually, the main function, as I perceive it, is the willpower. And when receptive to the voice of the self and using the willpower according to its guidance, that's when the will is actually, when the work of individuation actually advances. It's also important then to remember that then our own will can actually be our law, provided, of course, that we act from our higher motives. As Jung put it quite bluntly, no one comes to his true selfhood by being what society wants him or her to be, nor by doing what it wants her to do. Family, society, church, profession, trade, political, patriotic alliances, moral and ethical rules, commandments are in reality not at the least conducive to the true spiritual welfare of the human soul. On the contrary, they are more often than not the very shackles which keep us from our true spiritual destiny. So it always comes back to our own self. The art of making decisions is between us and our inner God, Goddess. Here is the persona. It's only a mask of the collective psyche, that feigns individuality, tries to make others and oneself believe one is an individual, but actually one is playing a part, whereas the collective consciousness speaks through us with the persona. In the work, we will come to facing right away the persona and our shadow, the big challenge of facing our shadow, the part of us that the ego definitely does not want to know, doesn't want to own, all of the stuff that we don't want to be or feel. But the worlds, all the worlds of both darkness and the world of light are within us, including the endless tension of opposites. On the left, it says in Hebrew, this is one of my work that shows in the book, The Song of Lilith, which I will talk later, and it says Ohev and Oyev, which means friend and enemy. And as you can see, they are very close, both literally in the pronunciation, in the word itself, Ohev and Oyev, but they are very close in reality. The ego I perceive as awareness, and the most that the ego can strive for, and not necessarily get to it, is a continual awareness of the conflicting polarities that are likely to appear in us. And new ones as old ones are being resolved. It's an ongoing discipline, work, struggle at times. So the need of waiting and seeing and living things out, weighing various aspects and bringing them to balance again and again, and ever ready to work with the materials that life presents us. So the work actually progresses at the pace of a tree. It started out as a small acorn and eventually becoming a forest giant. But surely it doesn't happen overnight. The hermetic vessel for the transformation, for the work, is oneself. You can see me here as a child with my favorite ball, and which shows in my first stream of Jungian analysis in Montreal of the 80s. That's why I choose this photo. We are the laboratory, and we are also the workers in that space. A tricky situation. And if the ego, when it achieves truth, tranquility, then all the initiatives come directly from the self. So then you can surely walk in life, putting one foot in front of the other, and not worry about the head taking any major decisions. Quite an ideal situation. The tension of opposite brings eventually, working with it, to certain union of opposites. What we call the third, and the third is unknown always. And rebirth comes from the collective unconscious, from the source. Death and life, life and death, transformations. Nothing in our psyche ever goes away. It just gets recycled, transformed. All the energies, the good ones, the bad ones, everything live in us forever. And what we learn is to transform that energy for the service of the self. And that miracle, the solution to these opposing demands of the psyche, of all our different energies, will not appear in a form of an intellectual conclusion. like a thought out plan, like a computer program, but will arise in a dream or a fantasy vision in the form of an image, symbols. And it will be so unexpected that it will feel as a miracle. And that kind of symbol has the effect of breaking any deadlock. It has the power to bring our psyche a newly created form through which the life energies can flow in a newly creative effort. The experience of the divinity, in other words, we use for the self, like the God within, the goddess, can be grasped only through a symbolic language. And we have seen it through the ages, through different disciplines, through the times. Like in alchemy, the image of the connection, the sacred marriage, the sun and the moon, the uruburu, the snake eating its tail. In the Kabbalah, which I love and study, and mystical Judaism as well, the Sfirot, the emanations. We are on the bottom in Malchut, kingdom, and at the top is Keter. Keter being the crown, corona. In the Christian Trinity, in the tarot cards, all images, symbols, just like in dreams. And the destiny is actually uncovering and discovering what cards our fate dealt us. I think this is the one that I have discovered for myself. On the right, you have an image of, also from my Lilith book, of a woman playing a bandoneon, the instrument of the tango. It's not an accordion, it's a bandoneon. And the calesita, the carousel that I grew up with, the Torah. And those are my roots. And on the left, the Black Madonna, which I will dive into that through the next few slides. Know yourself is, as the oracle in Delphi says us, but in any mystical discipline, know yourself is actually where we start from. Knowing the shell of the complex, of our complex psyche, the personal unconscious. My particular ones, my family constellation is a very much Jewish, patriarchal, religious, my grandparents, but not my father's. My father, my mother, they were not religious, but they continue certain tradition. Actually, they were socialist communists that decided to move to a kibbutz in Israel. That's my family history. Exile, persecution, immigration. We each have a map of our family history. And that's where the work starts, by getting to know ourselves, our family history, and our personal, our ancestors' history. And the core of the complex is diving into, to get to know the core of the complex that we each carry, is diving into the ancestral collective unconscious, our roots, the roots of our soul. On the right, you have my grandparents who immigrated from the old world to the new world, from Austro-Hungarian Empire, what they call it then, Poland and Hungary, into the new world, to Argentina. And the spirit of the time that my parents grew up with in the 30s and 40s and 50s, the zeitgeist, as we call it, collective spirit of the times, for me was Zionism, the dream of a Jewish homeland after the Holocaust, after the Second World War. My personal history was that at the age of 11, I journeyed to the Promised Land. And this on the right, you see us in front of the boat, Theodor Herzl, that will take us to Israel, a Zionist vision. And the left is my mother, my grandmother, my auntie, myself, holding my soccer ball. And the little guy that is so happy is my cousin. He didn't come with us. It was just us. Often I think maybe that's why he looks so happy and I look so serious. Our ancestors' archetypal complexes, as I showed you before, it was really right into the hero archetype, the moving into the promised land and defending our land, our new land of the Jewish state. The father's hero archetype was working through us, through me anyway, big time. And you see on the right, it's me with the glasses in the army in 1973, where there was also quite a serious war in Israel. So the individual archetypes that I spotted, that I uncovered right when I started doing the work in Montreal in the 80s, was immediately Artemis and Athena. Artemis, Diana, the archer, and Athena, the intellectual. Then we look into identities and how they conflict within us. My name was changed when I arrived in Israel from Liliana to Leah, and eventually to Dr. Kleiner. And I had to collect all the pieces. As your will is, so is your deed. My passion from the moment I remember has been for painting, creating, using my hands, creating, adventure as well, and the sea. These are the paintings I did as a child, teenager, at the age of 11 to 14, 15, when I actually stopped painting and went to the intellectual. From our discovering our will and our deed, the best, I would say, like many other Jungian say, is follow your bliss. For me, it was the journey back from the old world into the new world, this time to Canada, to Montreal, and discovering the worlds of wild nature, of feminism, and of Jung, and all that happened in my late 20s and 30s when I dove into Jung and feminism in Montreal, and those were the 80s and early 90s. As your deed is, so is your destiny. Images of breaking loose, wild. And when I started my work, my inner work, seriously, then a series of synchronicities started happening on the path. The first one, there was what I would say as they say, blew my mind was on a trip that I took from Montreal to visit my family in Israel. In 1990, I stopped in Greece, in the island of Lesbos, where a friend from Montreal told me that she has a place there, and I stopped there out of sheer adventure. And when I was walking in the Eressos, a little town in Greece, in the island of Lesbos, I walked into this little museum and right into this relief. Now, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but I drew it right away. A woman on a horse and another woman accompanying her. And she is approaching an apple tree, the tree of knowledge, and the snake. Somehow that encountering with this relief, the energy, and the whole image triggers something very deep in myself, in my unconscious. And then again, when I got to Israel and went to the Jerusalem Museum, the Jerusalem Art Museum, another synchronicity, I encounter all these figurines of the goddesses. It's rare to see this in Israel. It's a very patriarchal society. The divine feminine woke up in me, awakening ancient roots from the depth of the collective unconscious. I really felt like something deep was changing in me and opening up, including the archetypal Artemis. On the top is a vase that then eventually inspired me to start this other series of paintings. The source, of course, is in the mythological core, the collective unconscious, the source of the complex that woke up between patriarchy and matriarchy. I started a series of work, but first of all, I let you look at this image, because on the right, you have an image from my graduation in Haifa University of the 70s. And on the left is an image from the goddesses religion, where the snakes were the cat on her head, a very famous figurine that eventually I met personally when I went to finish my book of Inanna, my second book, in Crete. She's in the Museum of Heraklion in Crete. So that was the tension of opposites deep in my unconscious that I had to hold on and live with. The transformations into the world of wholeness. Here is the ball again, that repeats itself as a symbol, personal symbol, but also a very collective one that accompanies me. And the path that I would say that I was guided, I didn't choose, I choose to follow, was to start a dialogue through dream work and artwork, and that has followed me all my life, since the 80s. This painting is called Look In, Look Out, and it's of a series of self-portraits that I do regularly. I started developing my own symbolic language. This is a painting after Lesbos that I did a series, and already in the bottom you can see part of my symbolic language evolving: the hands, the snake, the heart, vagina, the bird, the eye, the fish. All symbolic language from the unconscious. On the left, there are Hebrew letters, and that's much later. This is from the last 5 years. And on the right is the one from, I would say, 30 years ago, maybe. Dreams, I can't say enough about dreams. Dreams have guided me all my life. This is the first dream that I still carry with me as a precious one. It was the first dream when I started analysis in Montreal in '86. And just quickly telling you the essence of it, the dream revealed already the complex. The witch showed up and was selling candies. I right away wanted to buy and gave her money, cents 2 and 5. The 2 were in a circle, the 5 was in a square sense. I was paying her way too much. She was asking me for only 66. I gave her 7. Numbers and shapes are very symbolic. Then I was showing my precious stones, diamonds on a table, glass stones, and she looked at them, the same witch, and then she says, well, these are all dark, very rejecting, all dark, all the same. And I said to her, no, look well, take off your glasses, your sunglasses, because they are blue and purple and green. And there were few shapes. One was like a diver's old-fashioned hat. The other one was a bottle, head of a bottle, very, again, very symbolic shapes. And then this other maternal, the good mother shows up and takes them all and gives me in exchange, or I'm presented in exchange with this big ball, the same as the ball from my childhood. But the ball is covered with all the diamonds, all the precious stones, and it has a zipper in the front. So you can wear it. Quite an image of wholeness. And then the witch shows up again and says, well, that will look really good on a man with muscles, strong man. And I answer, well, it could look really good on a woman too. A swimmer, for example, a good swimmer with muscles. So I'm not about to analyze the dream. I'm sure you understood quite a bit, but definitely I was presented with my deep complex of the negative mother and the positive mother, and a good resolution, a good prognosis. Dreams are like letters. In the Talmud, we say that a dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that is not open. You will see that on the left, it's a postcard that my grandfather sent to my grandmother from, I think, Germany, Poland to Argentina, back and forth before he brought them over to Argentina. Those images are really precious. I got them thanks to my mother that saved them. The bird has shown up, and of course, anyone that does the work, birds will show up, just like circles and squares and so on. The bird is a symbol of the soul. I was discovering wild nature in Nova Scotia when I lived in Montreal. The ocean was always one of my passions, love. And then I just fall in love with wild nature there and wanted to stay. And then I was visiting a friend, a very close friend there, and I just wanted to stay there. And I had this dream where in its essence, I was ready to stay. And the dream, I was next to a window, and sitting on the window was a huge bird, bigger than me. And he said to me, I am not from Sable River. Sable River was the name of the place where I was staying, which really shook me and actually also made me laugh. And I said, okay, I'm getting the message. I guess my journey continues. Letting the self guide is really the key, is having faith that there is that place in you that knows way, way better than your head, your ego mind, the monkey mind, as we also call it. That letting the self guide for me was biting the apple. the apple of the tree of knowledge. Another painting from Lesbos on the right of the bird and the snake and the apple tree. On the left is biting the apple, the uruburu, the connection. I started working again full-time in the arts, first through mask performances in Montreal and doing some shadow work. And then I got somehow synchronistically that book fall into my hands, like it happened to me a few times in life. It was the interpretation of the myth of Psyche and Eros by Erich Neumann, that some of you might know. Beautiful, beautiful book, Erich Neumann. And I fall in love with the mythos of Psyche and Eros. The mythology is like symbols, the depth of the unconscious. Mythology is the spirit of the time. And it's timeless and spaceless. The Greek myth of Psyche and Eros kept me busy for a few years. I usually work with one myth at a time, usually feminine myth, and I process them through the arts mostly, and then through my intellect. But first through the art. When I paint, when I do any art, movies or whatever, I don't come at it from my head at all, but I let the unconscious talk, the dream, the vision. The myth of Psyche and Eros is definitely a union of sexuality and spirituality. Eros, the son of Aphrodite, is bringing a new sexuality, spiritual sexuality into our psyche. This new mythology, I started putting them in films. That's where I was finding the union of storytelling, my intellectual self, and also my artistic skills. And I started working with myth that came from my unconscious ideas, stories mostly, and did a few short films that you can actually see them. They're in my website. And immediately I started the conflict that was in me, my destiny of uniting and transcending the tension between the father and mother archetypes, matriarchal and patriarchal spirits, brought me to hope for new myth that the wisdom will be not just father, God, and male, but also mother and nature and female. This brought me to the Psyche and Amor. I work on it through a black and white film that I use the tango as an archetype of these two energies. Tango de alma y amor. I also used myself as a dancer. Since I came from Argentina, I should know how to dance the tango. Here, I thought this was a good image of our collective and individual past. The card is from Poland of the 20s. This in the middle are my parents in their wedding in the 48, and me and my partner in Montreal, my tango teacher and partner. Eventually, I brought the tango to Victoria in '95 and opened the first tango school there. But that's a different story. The next dream that, I mean, we all have big dreams and more and smaller ones. The next amazing dreams that blew my mind again, opened my mind, not blew it, was I was still in therapy, in analysis, and the dream in its essence was I was walking in the woods and towards in a narrow path, and I encounter walking towards me an old witch type, And she passes me a book that looks just like the book in the middle that eventually I produced that. And in the book, the black book on red letters, it says Lilith. Well, those days, I had no idea who Lilith was, and there was no Google, even because Lilith was taken out of the Bible. It's Jewish mythology, the first woman before Eve. She was created together with Adam from the same black earth, put together in paradise. And immediately Adam started asking her to obey, but she refused, spread her wings, and flew out of paradise and into the Red Sea and started a new life, copulating with demons. That's the myth. And then God created Eve from the rib of Adam, that obviously she will be a little bit more submissive. So that myth came to me after researching it in libraries and bookstores and so on in the 90s, early 90s. And then I let my unconscious work it through different manifestations in the arts. One of them is this film that I will let you see a little piece of it. It's just the first few minutes, and you can see the whole film, as I say, in my website or in YouTube. In the movie, I tell the story, jumping from one language to another, from Hebrew to English to Spanish, back and forth. But I'm sure you will understand it. And as I say, these are just the first initial minutes. They say there is love in the world. What is love?
אומרים, אהבה יש בעולם. מה זאת אהבה? Many years passed, אלפי שנות אור וחושך, and one day you came out of the woods and into a city, a modern city, עיר צפונית, donde los hombres vinieron a buscar dinero
And
y
came to
amor.
look for money and love.
השטן לא סולח ולא שוכח. Satan's angels y los ángeles de la muerte will find you again to punish you. Your scream reached the house of the dream spirit, and he sent his messengers to rescue you, los mensajeros del sueño, del amor. You followed the music and walked into the dream house, לתוך בית חלומותייך, donde se entra por la salida.
So it's, as you can see, it's quite a dream kind of put into images, and you can see the whole thing, and it has a good ending, so don't worry. But I took my unconscious, did all the work and put all the symbols together there, and the dreams are there. This is 93, and already there is the issue of ecology, the trees, pollution, the confrontation between the Eve archetype and the Lilith archetype, the male, the cellular, the old-fashioned phone. It's all there. And of course, my ego didn't know what it was doing, but it just did it. Then I moved from there is also the tension between urban life and nature, the beginning, the lost paradise. We move into the urban life where man comes to look for power, the ego, and kind of love, so-called, quote unquote. But I did move from Montreal and discover the spirit of wild nature in the Pacific North and the beloved ocean. And I found and made a home and felt that nature became my lover. This is my studio, was facing in Galiano Island, just across from an eagle nest tree. And I had a season with eagles, and that was awesome. Then I discovered the beauty of the nature around that, the sandstones, the spirit of the place. Female nature was my next series of painting. I went full time back into my first love, oil paintings. These are very big paintings that I did. I was painting really big then. Not so much anymore. Then you have to carry them or sell them. But I discovered female nature as sacred matter. I did a series with models that I took the female body, the redemption of matter, I call it, and I took it as elements in nature. I did a series of the female body as water, as wood and rock and tree and so on. These are some of them. My path brought me to Mexico. I used to actually drive from the islands, Gulf Islands, Galiano, to Mexico, back and forth, and discover, following the Virgin of Guadalupe, that I will talk about it in a minute. On the right side, this painting is called The Cycles of Life and Death, of course, of seeing the salmon spawning. I also started a conversation with the self, with the unconscious, through self-portraits, which I do regularly once a year, more or less, mostly in oil paints and some in woodcuts. I love working with organic materials. Here you have one from Mexico, Raven Man, when I lived for a little while with the Tarahumara, the natives, the Raramuri of the Sierra Madre, the Copper Canyon, and my love for the eagles on the right. Seal Woman and Felix Culpa, my cat. I call it Felix Culpa. Well, I won't get to that story right now. Sorry, I just want to keep moving. The one on the right was done, its night vision was done all with candle lights and Medusa, of course, the dark feminine. I started following the path of La Virgen de Guadalupe, the Black Madonna of Mexico, which is the last living manifestation of the Dark Madonna in our times. The Virgen de Guadalupe is the Virgin of Life and Death, and she is very, very important to the Mexican culture. There was this painting, it's not a painting, actually, it's a really big size of a wall, a mural, and it was inspired by the Mexican muralist, their amazing work. You have on the left the death and birth, and on the right the tango of life, and the weaver. It's called the weaver of life and death. The return of the Black Madonna in my life through the myth of Guadalupe, of Lilith, and eventually Inanna was also what my path, my spirit brought me to do for the rest of my life till now. I started doing artist books from cedar bark that I loved. This is the first one of the Triple Goddess, which I did not reproduce. It's a small one. And the next one was The Song of Lilith, which is a book I have reproduced. I have it here. I don't know if you can see me, but it's right here. It's the book, the handmade book was reproduced in Jerusalem. But it took me 10 years to finish that book. And I always work with images, and the images guide me. And when it's ready, when the self tells me it's ready, then my intuition knows, and I put the text. Then I switch to this other archetype, my intellect, my Athena, and weave the text into the images, and some miracles happen usually. They really fit in, the pages fit, everything fits in. It's the unconscious really is very wise. Anyone that works with dreams knows that. The book was reproduced and published in Jerusalem because I wanted that was also guided into bringing this work out into the public first through the films, and then I knew that nobody was going to see my handmade book, or very few people in a museum, but I wanted the story and the work to reach out, just like I'm doing now. When 10 years after I finished the working with Lilith and reproduced it in Jerusalem with an amazing place, Jerusalem Fine Arts Prince, Yair Medina, who became a friend through the times. He has produced all of my books. It's interesting that a Moroccan Jew that used to be religious, but not so much anymore, is the one that produces all my books of the sacred feminine and in Jerusalem, Synchronicities. As soon as I finished the work of Lilith and brought the new reproduced book to Canada, walking down the street in Vancouver in Commercial Drive and thinking, what is going to be next? Well, I didn't have much time to think because I just came across a man selling some stuff on the sidewalk. And I bent down and I picked up a book, and the book was The Myth of Inanna from the ancient Sumerian culture. I opened it up, and right in the first page was Lilith lived in the tree of Inanna. So yeah, incredible. And I started researching Inanna for the next 10 years. The myth of Inanna is really a pre-patriarchal one. And the story was written on Sumerian language, and it took decades to decipher it. On clay, it was written in Iraq. It was found in Iraq of today, Sumer of ancient Sumer then. And it's a long myth, unlike Lilith, which is very short. It has a few chapters, and I was so in love, and still am, with that myth, with the wisdom that it brings. So again, I started working it. She unites the three worlds, heaven, earth, and underworld, which symbolically is the spirit, our ego, and unconscious. The synchronicities continue happening. And when I was invited in Berlin to participate in a show called an art show of paintings, Jewish women artists dispersed around the world. There was Berlin in 2015 or so. I just was walking in the museums, checking the museums of Berlin, and the Pergamon Museum. I walked right into the gates of Inanna, of the palace of Inanna that were taken from Iraq. I also met Artemis of Ephesus in Caesarea in Israel, a very famous sculpture that inspired my image of Inanna, that you see in the middle, the many-breasted goddess. So the making of the Song of Inanna, of that book, that took for another 10 years, all through images, organic materials, as you see, seaweed, palm, cedar bark, paper from garlic stems, from onion skins, and so on and so forth. This is the book reproduced. Jerusalem again, with the text that I added to it. I put the stories themselves of Inanna, just written in a nutshell, size, long stories, and then I did an interpretation of the stories from a psychological, Jungian, and feminist perspective. The next book that I came out with, I produced, is called Female Nature, Sacred Matter. And it's a collection of my paintings, some of them you just saw, from 1995 to 2008, looking back at that path of being guided by the divine feminine. So that book also has a text called Dangerous Ideas. So these are two paintings that are very important to me. The one on the left is Lilith, and I produced it in Galliano. The one on the very left, the red one, is the beginning of the painting next to it, the green one. Yeah, it's the same painting. I think it's just I work on it for about 8 years, not every day, but continuously, yeah, until somehow I knew it was finished. And when they used to ask Picasso, when do you know his painting is finished? And he responded, when I sell it. Well, that's not the case for me. I guess that's when it's taken from me, gladly. But I know when it's finished, especially the self-portraits. It's just there's a place of me that knows. I always say, I wish I could live the rest of my life with the same assurance, certainty that I have when I do the work. The one on the right is Inanna, and it was made in Jerusalem. And on the left is the beginning of that painting, and on the right is the ending of the painting. That one took only 3 years while I was living in Jerusalem, and it was influenced by the energies, of course, of the place and me in that place. So in the last presentation, someone asked me, well, not the last, but about 3-4 years ago, what is next? Because I was presenting the book of Inanna. And again, I can't say enough about the stories of Inanna, the wisdom that she brings, the descent in the underworld, the death and reunion with her suffering sister, the transformations, the renewal, her life with Dumuzi, the shepherd, the sacrifice of Dumuzi, the connection with Enki. Anyway, I'm getting off the path. Someone, after I presented Inanna, said, okay, what is next? And again, I didn't know. But then I sat with Lilith. By the way, when I had that dream, I thought it was me. Lilith was, they call me Lilita, but now Lilith is the mythological Lilith. It is me too, but not the personal me. So Lilith came to me, Inanna came to me, and if I united the two, I get Liliana, which is my birth name. So I thought I should work with the Song of Liliana, which is what I'm doing, and I started doing it about 4 years ago, after my mom passed to the other side, to the spirit world. And I am working now, and it probably will take me quite a few more years, on the Song of Liliana, my Black Madonna, which I call conscious matter, or the redemption of matter, which has been the archetype that has run through me and all my life. What is the Black Madonna? What is for me? I believe Earth is our spiritual mother, and the Black Madonna is the earth-oriented side of our soul, the earthy feminine archetype that is needed to be made holy again. This is why I call the redemption of matter, because it relates to life in a kind of natural, instinctual way, and acts as a matrix of all our creativity and renewal, definitely mine. And she is a deep and mysterious. She guides the processes of the soul for renewal and compensates the one-sided intellect, the light of the father, the logos, the patriarchal. And it's very much what we are needing these days. She's also the one that brings sacred sexuality. You can read in the stories of Inanna, the beautiful union of Inanna and Dumuzi, the shepherd. The female body was sacred. That's also what the myth of Psyche and Eros is trying to tell us, that the union of Eros and soul and Psyche brings the child, the new conscious archetype of the unity of body and spirit. By the way, the child of Psyche and Eros is called joy. In Hebrew, Yetzer and Yetzirah come from the same root. You can see in Hebrew very much the roots of the language. It's an ancient language. And Yetzer, Yetzirah, one means creation, the other means the drive, the passion. And obviously they come from the same root. So the Black Madonna is the one to revive this earth-oriented side of the soul. But she's not an easy archetype to face. It's a dark feminine power. It's not logical, but it brings with her the transformative principle of life. She's connected to the life and death. She's not the union of life and death and renewal. She's definitely not afraid of death, and she doesn't approach it in her head. She probably doesn't have a head much of. She's of equal intensity to the father archetype. In the light, she's a healing force. But in the dark, which is what we are seeing very much in our days, in the dark and repressed, the earthy feminine, she sickens us, destroys the best intentions, our best individual and collective intentions. I had a big dream when getting to the end of this story, but I tell you quickly, that told me about the integration that will happen between the spirit and soul, passion, the spirit, soul, and body, matter. And in the dream, the symbol of red and white repeated itself in different manifestations. At the beginning, I was leaving my house in Montreal, and I had red and white shoes, sneakers. Then I was already in the West Coast, and I saw birds flying at my eye level, a line of birds, of eagle and raven and heron and whatever else was pelican, I think, and they were all red and white. The eagle was not white and black, but white and red. And the next image was, I was by a lighthouse trying to reach the shore, the lighthouse, and the lighthouse was red and white. Lighthouse, what a beautiful symbol it is, right? The union of conscious and unconscious. Whereas in the last image, I was hosting two women by the sea. One was inside swimming, the other one was on the shore. And I was looking at the fish, and the fish were all pink, red and white. This time they were pink, and some were dead and some were alive. And I was going to ask them for supper and share a bottle of wine with them. And the wine was called Jung. And there is actually a non-alcoholic wine called Jung. I didn't know that at the time, but that was the dream of the union of spirit and passion. And towards the end, I want to present to you my Black Madonna that supported, inspired me all my life, which is my mother on the right in my studio in Victoria in the 90s. And behind her is the Black Madonna Guadalupe. And I can honestly say that I probably wouldn't have made it without her, not just being born, of course, but she has been behind my back all my life, encouraging me to become what I was meant to be, and very much incorporating in her the Black Madonna together with the maternal loving mother. So may we have the courage to integrate her, our Black Madonna, in all of us, women and men, so we can transform our world both individually and collective. I can say finally that art for me is an instrument of bringer of light. Art is visionary that seeks to free the spirit and open the heart. It's in search for truth, for the depth of feeling. It's a uniting force that challenges the I that we think we are. I think our societies want to tame our emotions in order to keep us in denial and reject this kind of art, to keep controlling us. But I believe true art is an instrument of transformation, a bringer of light and consciousness. For tikkun olam, as they say in the Kabbalah, in my tradition, tikkun olam means the restoration of the world, the collecting of all the sparks that has been dispersed into into creating the new Jerusalem, the new world. Thank you. I think I will stop here and leave some time for you to have a conversation with me, to have a conversation with you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I am speechless. Wow. Maybe to gather our thoughts for a moment, we could just take a quick 5-minute bio break. And you can jot down some notes or put it in the chat, your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to work through and answer them as we move through. But yeah, I am so moved, and I have 5 madly scribbled pages of notes. So I would love to formulate my thoughts as well. So yeah, 5 minutes. We'll see you at 8:26, and we'll be back here. And again, if you want to put your questions in the chat, go for it, and we'll get back to those in a moment. And some of you are going to go. That's fine. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming tonight, for those that need to go. But yeah,
Thank you.
back in 5 minutes to have a conversation. Thanks. Just because sometimes the conversations that follow after are also so powerful. So if you don't want to have your camera on, that's fine. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll read it for you. But if you want to speak up, raise a hand or put an icon up, or just speak up. I will open the floor with just this, saying, that was such an incredibly eloquent, beautiful, colorful, and rich exemplar of how that journey can look. I resonated with so many pieces, and just want to spend hours with your artwork, and every little piece made me want to go, I just want to watch a little more. So powerful, so beautiful, and really also very clear example of how to do this, right? How to follow those pieces and those synchronicities and those dreams and those archetypes, and just live them and live with them and live through them, like just beautifully, beautifully done. So I just want to effusively say thank you so much from me for that amazing journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah. We share the name as well.
Yeah, we share. I've learned in my 5 pages, we share a lot. Same thing, symbols, that sort of thing. But I'm curious about questions from others. Does anyone have anything they want to explore or ask?
Yes, please. This is the part I enjoy the best. I already know all what I presented.
Yes, exactly. So anyone want a paper? It's a lot to take in, I know.
Yes, and people sometimes are shy, so
For sure.
you can guarantee that there is not a silly question. Any question is good question.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or comment for that matter.
Jeremy says, I am so inspired by your journey of self and how you have followed your true path rather than conforming to the collective pressures of society. I appreciate that too. To not follow the common path and live and create you. So thank you. That's from Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. It's I'm very glad to have men in my presentations and my talks and reading my books. I think we are all in this together.
Yeah. Mm.
I have a question for you, Leah. It's my male archetype that's working through me, but there's a rational part of my head that says, how did you live? I mean, it's difficult you followed your passion, you followed your passion with Jung, and yet how did you actually manage to make a living? I mean, did you work as a therapist as well to sort of, do the unnecessary part of paying the bills, or were you able to follow your passion exclusively?
Yes, I did work as a therapist since I graduated in the 80s with my doctorate in clinical psych. And then I only did it in a very minimal way, private practice, and only with people that would like to do this work with dreams. I do not work with people that don't bring me dreams or don't want to go into the depth of the unconscious. And I still do that in a very limited way. Most of my time is devoted to artwork and writing, painting, all what you just saw. And how did I make a living? I don't know, but Goddess always provides. I swear. I don't even, I am not one to look at my expenses and my income, and never did that. I have faith that if I follow the self will provide. I call her the goddess. I talk to her and I say, okay, I need this or that. What would you like me to do?
Mm-hmm. I love how you have those examples where you're walking down the street, you ask the question and boom, there it is, right? Just
yes, yes. And of course, I only show you the light and part. I mean, I skip the times of going down into hell and depression and so on. But that's part of the journey. That's the spiral, right? You go up and down. You go down to meet your sister in the underworld and die and get renewed. I think our societies have taught us, the patriarchal logos, to be afraid of pain, to be afraid to run away from emotional pain, not physical, but emotional, to run away from sadness and anger, and well, not so much men, but definitely women. Mostly the pain and the depth of feeling. And I think that's a major mistake, that we are suffering from it because the body is the sickness. The body pays for that. We escape the emotional pain and then it translates into physical sickness.
Thank you for your answer. My gut was telling me how it worked, but my head required an intellectual answer.
It's okay. I am with you. I'm quite an intellectual myself. I just keep it in place.
I have to take some tips from you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Dee has a question. I'm actually seeing quite a few artists based on my, curious into your Brady Bunch windows. Dee asks, can you speak about the creation of mandalas as a process of individuation?
Well, I think that's something that Jung will talk more than me, because he was quite an artist on doing the mandalas and all of that. Mandalas are only a come to me when they come, and sacred geometry. And usually I just got into a series of them now because of a last dream, important dream that I had about a synagogue in the shape of an octagon. And then I started researching the octagon and got into the Leonardo da Vinci love for the octagon, the churches, and so on. I don't think there is any synagogue in that shape. Anyway, but I am getting off the topic of mandala. The mandala, the circle, I just work on it on a very personal way, like everything else. And it doesn't come from a discipline. Okay, now I'm going to, from my head, I'm going to do mandalas. They come when they come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Joanne says, so inspirational. I'm an artist and have dipped my toes in exploring the unconscious in my art. Do you have any tips on how to make this a daily practice?
Wow. The tip is discipline.
Yeah.
To train the ego. Is like people ask when I work with people with dreams, I always say, did you record the dream? And I give them hell if they didn't. It's like a yoga teacher. You have to have the discipline to practice your yoga every day or whatever it is. And I think that's what I put about the ego. The job of the ego is willpower.
Yeah.
The willpower we have, it's like riding a horse. You have to train it to go where you need it to go. Well, the who needs to train it is the ego too. It's tricky, but it's possible. I think if we put all our intention and we take it as seriously as putting food on the table, I mean it, as putting food, nourishment for the soul, then it pays off. Immediately you will see that starts to pay off. The synchronicities, the dreams, the visions, everything you need comes to you. It's true. I definitely have lived that, and I hope I continue to live it. But of course you make mistakes. There are no guarantees, of course. But even the mistakes that's there to learn from.
Yes.
And especially if you don't avoid your feelings, you do have to stay in touch with the depth of your feelings. Distractions is what we get all around us, very much in modern societies.
Easy to get distracted. I appreciate how you demonstrated how to let the self guide, right? Let the self lead, to really listen to those inklings and synchronicities and follow them. Yeah, that was a discipline, to follow them, right?
To follow them. I think if you live life symbolically, life becomes the dream.
Well said.
So I'm right now sitting, seeing all of you in this little box, in this machine, and that's quite magic. And that's a dream too.
Yeah, it is. I feel like I'm in a dream. Sheila says, Liliana, does your intuition speak to you in visions or dreams? How do you receive the wisdom to know the right path to take? Or is it a feeling in your body? So how does that come in? How does intuition speak to you? And how do you know what's the right path?
Okay, this is Sheila that connected us. Hi, Sheila. The intuition, well, your intuition and mine got me here. It's Sheila who connected me to Leah and to this presentation. I think intuition, by definition, works intuitively, I don't know how it works, but it works through sensations in the body, through just things that happen, that you are in the wrong path and things don't flow. Simple as that. So you have to wait until the door opens and the river flows. And then if you go against that, you think you will hit a wall. Then in dreams, for sure, but dreams is not intuition. You know, dreams they are literally letters, messages from the divine that you need to open, and you need to take them seriously, to say thank you, to open them and try to write them and try to work with them. And that has been my practice since I got into dreams in the 80s, and really say thank you. It's very hard to, so that's then the intuition is to take the dream and turn it into creatively into a way that you can incorporate it, integrate it, understand it in a visceral way, and through the images through as well. Yeah, I think that's a mix that I can't put it in a logical manual.
Yeah, you actually do create manuals, but not in the way we think of manuals. Yeah.
No.
She says, thank you so much for a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments even, or reflections? What's coming up?
I was struck when somehow or other I was getting a feeling when you were talking about your time, well, specifically in Greece, but you mentioned something about the island of Crete, and I'm pretty sure that there was a matriarchal society in the island of Crete, you know, 1500 BC kind of time frame. And perhaps it generated some of the Greek myths. Could you talk a bit more about that? Because I was struck that the Jewish myth of Liliana and the Ayana, and also this ancient civilization that I have a vague recollection of. It seems like there's a feminine archetype buried in the Middle East. It's very well suppressed. But I don't know, that was the feeling I was having. Oh, that divine feminine coming up in the Middle East again.
Definitely. I went to Crete to finish writing the book of Inanna. Because the Minoan civilization, the palace of Knossos in Crete, still has figures and images from the goddess queen of the ancient matriarchal civilizations. And then really I was so in awe of that, the artifacts and the art and the frescoes and the figurines and so on, and they do have them in the museum. I hope they keep them there. Then you can see all over the island of Crete the sign, the labyrinth. Actually, I have one right here. This is a labyrinth. I don't know if you can see. So the double axe labyrinth was to the goddess civilization there in Crete. The cross is for the Christians, or the Star of David, the Magen David, is for the Jews, and so on. There was the symbol sacred to them. Why a double axe? I mean, your interpretation is as good as anyone else. Mine and many others is the double axe is a tool that is both works for cutting wood, defending. It also looks like a butterfly. It's union of opposites, if you want, many things, a beautiful symbol. And that was the symbol of the goddess. Also, the snakes were sacred to the goddess religion. Then patriarchal indoctrination turned the snake into the evil one, right? So all of that I discovered in the island. Well, before I have been reading about it, researching Inanna and so on, but also seeing it. When you see something and you feel the energy of the place and the energy of the objects that remain, it's quite fascinating. It also really is a conversation then with my unconscious and the place. I remember a last dream I had there before I left. Actually, I had two big dreams in Greece, one in Lesbos, the first time in 91, when I came back and I didn't know what to do with myself, apropos the question about intuition and guidance. I had a big dream before I left Lesbos that morning that told me to go back to Montreal and do and get into film studies, and I did. Get it. After my doctorate in psychology, I went into film studies and produced those films as a way of starting telling the stories, right? In Crete, before I left, and this is like 20 more, 30, 25 years later, whatever. And also, I remember waking up with a dream when I was right in the end of the book of Inanna, in March 8th, which is International Women's Day. And I also had a big dream about uniting and bringing back the stories and the joy of uniting the archetypes in a new way. One of the chapters of that dream, one of the images was that men and young men got into reading feminist women's poetry of Adrienne Rich and Mary Oliver and so on, and they were collaborating with the energy, which is was very encouraging to me, as both my own animus, my own male, collaborating more joyfully, and also men in the world. It works together. So yeah, I highly, that Minoan civilization was the last recorded civilization of in the Middle East. In Israel, you may get some of the figurines in the museum, but more and more the patriarchal archetype is taking over, as we know from the news, the same as in America and all over, you know. So it's really important to do the work. I think each one of us is the vessel.
Thank you for that. It was the Minoan civilization. I couldn't remember. I remember going to a museum on a cruise where I saw all the artifacts, but I didn't go to the palace.
Yes, yeah, highly recommended. Beautiful place. I want to go back. I will.
Yeah, you were almost heading back that way before, right? So then you'll get
It was exactly. Yes. Well, pushing the comfort zone is important to all of us. Traveling will do that to you, especially if you immerse yourself in different cultures, and especially in cultures that are so-called third world. I mean, Greece is almost that. It's the Mexico of Europe. But I love Latin America. I learned that one of my favorite stories is my book of Lilith, which is this, and actually is my first book, and it's like haikus. You can, if you want to have any of these books, you can write to me and I can ship them to you. But this book is published in 2008, and somehow in 2014, 15, whatever, I get an email from a woman that says to me, I found your book of Lilith in Mayantuyaco, which someone here will know about it. And in Mayantuyaco, I fall for it. It changed my life. I discovered it was the missing piece. And could I have one of those books? Do you still have them? Do you sell them? And I say, yes, please. And where would you where shall I where is Mayantuyaku? Where is that place and where do you live? So she says Mayantuyaku is a shaman place for the healing plants, the medicinal plants in the jungle of Peru near Pucallpa. I have no idea how the Book of Lilith, the Black Madonna, got to the jungle, the Amazons in Peru, but it did. And where do you live? I said, I live in BC. And this is a place where people come, Mayantuyaku, from all over the world. You know, I see Perla here. This is where we met, and it was one of the most amazing experiences, synchronistically, of meetings of souls. So that, yes, I ended up traveling with her to Mayantuyaku and meeting the shaman and following. This is how intuition and how synchronicities work. I needed to go there. I needed to do that journey. And I was called there. And actually this woman, Maureen, met me in the airport and took me there.
Nice. Wow. Synchronicities.
Many stories like that.
Yeah, I love the stories and those examples again, those synchronicities, or how to follow them, right? How to trust.
Exactly, but you need to have the courage to follow them, trust them, listen to them. These are really angels.
Yeah. You speak about the resurgence, the clawing back, it feels like to me, of the patriarchy and that whole energy. Perla asks a really good question that I'm very curious to hear the answer to as well. So currently, do you find women in leadership positions embodying Lilith or Inanna? Or
I wish, actually, I wish. I pray for it, definitely. I think, I pray for Inanna. Embodying Lilith is one-sided. You know, Inanna is the one that unites the three worlds, is the one that goes to the depth of the underworld of the psyche, and renews herself and brings the new life into the earth, the ego connected with the spirit. Inanna and Enki. Enki is the god of the sweet waters, you know, the ancestral to more androgyne, ancestral to Dionysius. So women in leadership, Perla, I wish I would see more of that. I think this is why I consider very important the bringing back the dark feminine, the dark Madonna, because it needs to be integrated with the white Madonna, the good mother, the bad mother. They need to come back in wholeness. The same as actually the archetypal father. It's not split in two, but the archetypal feminine is. So it's up to us to unite them. I see many women in leadership getting to be the same animus possessed, so to speak, masculine and in the head and in the power principle. But of course, there are some that are amazing, like I forget, skipping the name now, in India, Vandana, what is the name? It's a beautiful example of that integration, and she's in leadership, and she's really an earth mother. She totally embodies the Black Madonna and the white one. So there are here and there. I see them more in Argentina too. Maybe you meet them in Peru, and I see them definitely more in the third world. I think the societies in the affluent north, you know, in the Western societies, are even more repressed in that matter, which is a real shame. We need that more. somehow privilege of material privileges make us sleepy.
Yes. On sleepy, I'm just going to go with the last two there. Really, I'll close with but Alma asked, have you worked with fairy tales in your process of individuation and specific tales that you found interesting? As an aging woman, Little Red Riding Hood has become significant for me, although I don't yet know why, but I'm interested in your thoughts on fairy tale or on that fairy tale.
I love fairy tales. They are just myth. They're amazing. You probably saw in the little piece of the film of Lilith, the cutting of the head comes from a fairy tale, The Handless Maiden. Then if you continue watching the film, there is a part of the Sleeping Beauty and the biting of the apple, and that's in the film too. So yes, I work with fairy tales. I love fairy tales. I learned about interpretation of fairy tales, not just from reading Marie-Louise von Franz, but also my Jungian analyst in Montreal, Tom Kelly. His specialty was fairy tales. Definitely fairy tales, myth, dreams. We need new myth. That's we can read, and I mean, nothing is new, it's recycled, but that's what I was trying to do. And I still am. We lost the power of the myth in modern societies. And so we lost spirit.
Makes sense to share Pam's sentiments here then. Yeah, I like her. I am feeling, she is saying, I am feeling grateful, inspired, inspirited, and moved to connect with my family constellations. That's something that jumped up for me too. To follow my path forward as the journey takes me deeper into relationship to self. Thank you, Liliana, for the generous offering of your wisdom, rich and personal images and art, and the invitation to play with my path of continued individuation. And of course, the amazing portal into dreams that you have introduced me to. That's coming from Pam. And Jeremy wraps it up here with, you show an example, a brilliant example of how to listen, how to look and see the symbols and clues around us, and to keep that awareness like a set of glasses to look through, to see and feel and hear the signs for our own individual signals, so we can create that journey of true self. I hope, and I hope with him, I hope the collective finds this path too. And so I'll close with that and say, I think you are a shining example and an embodied, beautiful, wonderful, eloquent example of how we can bring this forward, and that we need to.
And you can, you need to, and you can. This is just the last thing I want to say. Each one of us, each one of you has that wisdom inside you. Just ask for it, reach out for it, follow it, and have the courage to follow it. You know, follow your bliss, follow your desire, bring meaning to this short life.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much. We're hoping to have you back for Inanna at some point, if you're so willing. That would be really great.
Yes, the Inanna is, I can talk about Inanna in my sleep.
I need to hear more about that. That seems like the yes for me. That was the big yes for me.
Oh,
so
definitely,
yeah.
Especially if I can do it this way. That was my initiation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. Yes.
Thank you.
Haishka.
Yes, thank you. All these beautiful faces, familiar and new.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. Gracias a ti. Muchas gracias.
Yeah, feel free to unmute.
Yes. Yeah, I hope you follow your path. Nobody, as they say, can follow it for you.
Yes, thanks, true.